guys, Jay here. Welcome to Eons of Battle. I bought a new Warhammer 40,000 army. And I have a lot of Warhammer 40,000 armies, but I felt like I needed a new one. And it's Kroot! I bought in one go, I bought a Kroot army, but it wasn't necessarily a complete impulse buy. I've been thinking about the Kroot for a while. My previous experience with Kroot is I actually put together a bunch of Kroot, originally for Kill Team, the older but not oldest version of Kill Team. And I played these guys a bunch in Kill Team, and they're horrible. They're absolutely awful in Kill Team. You can't even play them anymore, but they were fun to play. They don't do any damage, but you get a ton of Kroot bodies, and you get the Narlock Rider. And the Narlock Rider is an absolute beast, but it's just one guy, so it just gets shot down immediately in Kill Team, and then I'm left with my Kroots who do nothing in Kill Team. But that ended up, like I put together, I think 9 or 10 for Kill Team, and some Kroot Hounds. And then I ended up, the box comes with 16. And so I actually did paint all 16 Kroot because I like the Kroot. So I always had this inkling that I would like to collect Kroot. And then now that there are detachments in Warhammer 40,000 10th edition and there's a Kroot detachment, on a whim, I play Tabletop Simulator on the computer. And so I thought I'll play the Kroot and just see how it feels. It turns out that Kroot are really, really fun in 40k 10th edition. I have played so much Space Marines and Dark Eldar and Death Guard, and I'm kind of not that great at Warhammer 40k. I'm getting better. I am getting better. My win-loss ratio is starting to get a little bit closer to like 1 win for every 5 losses. But Space Marines are so hard to play because every unit is good and expensive and actually not that survivable in game, so you have to play really, really well. The Kroot, I feel like, are so much easier to play in 10th edition because you have so many bodies, and all of the bodies are kind of okay, but you don't get upset when they die because it's easier to have them actually achieve their goals. And so I really, really enjoyed playing them in game. Now, the other problem with collecting a Kroot army is it's one of the most expensive armies you can collect in 40k, but the stars aligned. My friendly local game store was having a Doorbuster Black Friday sale, and I happened to know that they had a bunch of boxes of the Kroot Hunting Pack starter sets. And so I picked up 2. And so that is a humongous portion of the army all done. And that same friendly local game store has a used shelf, and the used shelf was 50% off. And so I was able to get some crisis suits and a broadside, pair that with all of the Kroots that I already have, and I have this Warhammer birthday model, Tau Ethereal. I have darn near the entire army ready to rock and roll right now. Oh, Kroot are so much fun in 40k. Number one, their detachment is fantastic. It gives all Kroot models stealth, which means that they are -1 to be hit, which is great because Kroot are really, really squishy. But then there is a hero called the Flesh Shaper, and the Flesh Shaper grants them a 6-up Feel No Pain, and so stealth. Oh, and the detachment gives them a 5-up invulnerable save against ranged attacks. So that is a 5-up invuln, 6-up Feel No Pain, stealth, on a little Kroot body that actually makes them surprisingly survivable. Also, all Kroot have movement 7 and scout 7. And so in playing the Kroot in the tabletop, you make an absolute wall of Kroot. I take 3 blobs of 20, 1 squad of 10, 2 squads of Kroot rampagers, 2 squads of 2 Krootox riders, and then 2 salamanders. Just an absolute wall of Kroot. And then before the game starts, it all advances 7, and it's so gorgeous and so much fun to play. And I'm really excited to get it actually built. There's a lot of Kroot here. I think my favorite unit for the Kroot is gotta be the Kroot Rampagers. The Rampagers. In a previous video I did talking about every model I painted and how the Ogre Mob Tribe's Mournfangs were my favorite model that I painted last year, I teased that I'm working on something a little bit like the Mournfangs, and the Rampagers are very much like the Mournfangs. Just Kroot riding big, burly gorilla Kroot. They are fantastic. They have an incredible rule called Kroot Line Breakers, where on the charge, you count up all the models that made it within engagement range, and then for each of those models, you roll a d6, and on a 4-up, you cause d3 mortal wounds to your opponent. That is kind of phenomenal. It's really generous. Like the same rule, a lot of units have that same rule, like Space Marine Assault Marines with Jump Pack, but you only get to roll once and do 1 mortal wound per guy, and so you deal, on average, like 2 to 3 mortal wounds. Rampagers average 6 mortal wounds, and they can spike really hard. For me, they have spiked really hard a couple of times. They've whiffed a couple of times too, but they can deal up to a maximum of 18 mortal wounds. It can get really, really gross. And one of the fun things about Kroot is everything is kind of bad. The stat lines are kind of bad. Their damage potential is kind of bad on average, but there's kind of a game that you get to play as a Kroot player, and that is buff stacking. In my turn, I have to think about, okay, what can I kill on my opponent's side? What do I want to do to my opponent? Like, how do I want this turn to go? And then I can kind of shape the turn exactly how I want it to go. The salamanders, the lone spears, they have an ability, if they shoot something and they hit, then the rest of my Kroot army gets +1 to hit. No, they get reroll hits against that target. So all of a sudden I have to decide, like, what can my Kroots do? Do I want to give that rerolls to the squad my rampagers are going to go after? Do I want to give those rerolls to one of my big 20-man blobs that's going to be charging later in the turn? Do I want to stack it all on Magnus the Red because he's zipped up to my deployment zone? That happened in one game, and oh, it was glorious. I killed Magnus. It took my entire Kroot army for one turn, all going into Magnus, but we took him out turn 1, and it was fantastic. Actually, in collecting this army, I bought the White Dwarf that is all about the Kroot. White Dwarf, I read this magazine on a plane. I don't know. I don't remember what I paid for it. I think it was like $10. I think it was kind of expensive. Not super worth it, but it was interesting. There's a really, really nice story in here about the Kroot just observing a battle going on between the Adeptus Sororitas Imperial Guard against Genestealer cultists. And then they're like watching the battle take place. And some of the Imperial Guardsmen actually turn traitor for the Genestealer cult, and then they attack the sisters. And the Krooters watching and just like trying to figure out what's going on. And they're like, the sisters battle, they're tough opponents. I'm glad that they're getting whittled down before we have to charge into them. And it's just the way that the Kroot society works and how they're interacting with the battle, sneaking around in the shadows. And they're actually, to give orders across the battlefield, they actually are mimicking the sounds that the local birds make so that they don't alert the forces that are fighting the battle currently to like what they're up to. And it's really just kind of interesting how the Kroot operates. So, and there's some really fun Crusade rules. I haven't gotten a chance to try out Crusade 40K. I should, because 10th edition competitive is a little bit of a slog, but that's what I've been doing nonstop. And so it would be fun to try out Crusade. It's just hard because you have to play so many games, and it's hard to like figure out how to play game after game after game and like just keep it interesting instead of switching armies or switching your army list. I will say though, this White Dwarf was a fun read and it helped me get into the mindset of collecting this Kroot army. Also, playing Tabletop Simulator helped me actually build this list. I'm really happy with what I've got, which is, so my list is 3 big 20-man blobs of Kroots, and each one of those is going to have a Flesh Shaper. One of them will have a War Shaper attached, because there's some fun enhancements you can take on a Flesh Shaper and a War Shaper. And for Kroot specifically, you can attach 2 HQs as long as it's a 20-man brick. So for that one 20-man brick, I think they have sustained hits. No, they have lethal hits on 5s and 6s and precision. So if I'm going up against like Thousand Suns or something that really, really has like a really nice juicy leader attached to the squad, and that leader is kind of what makes the squad function, big 20-man brick of Kroot, all throw, making that one character take like 20 or so saving throws, there's a good chance of just sniping out that leader and like throwing my opponent off his rhythm. And speaking of throwing my opponent, that is also a big thing about this Kroot army. But so I've got 3 20-man blobs of Kroot, and then I got a 10-man blob of Kroot just kind of floating around. Then I have 1 Farstalker Kinban. Those guys, it's just another 10 Kroot, but they have Infiltrate. And so in a way to throw my opponent off, what I like to do is immediately as the game starts, or in deployment, I blop that squad down on an objective. And then I kind of have two options. Well, number one, I blop that Farstalker Kinband down, and then the Farstalker team has an ability where I pick one unit from my opponent's army, and then that squad has lethal hits against that particular unit. And so all of a sudden, my opponent thinks I'm up to something. When I plop that squad down and I'm like, that squad of cultists, I get lethal hits against that squad. That might change how my opponent deploys or how my opponent decides to go about this game, which is good because that Kinband is not doing squat this game. It's not very good. But with a little bit of that shenanigan, if I take a Trail Shaper, which I might, the Trail Shaper doesn't seem amazing, but if I take the Trail Shaper, then I can take that Farstalker Kinband and I can move it before the game starts. I can redeploy it. And so sometimes it's fun to just chuck it on an objective and then right before the game starts, be like, oh wait, hold on a second. And then just move it to a different objective. And again, I'm not doing anything. This squad is just there to move block and die. That's what the squad is there for, but it's really fun. I know Nick actually has the Farstalker Kinband. I don't think I'm actually gonna buy one. I might have actually made a really big purchase of alt sculpt minis. And so I'm really hoping they're actually little Tau guys that are like rugged. I guess it's like Catachan jungle fighters if they were Tau. And so I think those guys will actually look really, really good as my Farstalker Kinband and just be something a little bit different. Because one thing that is tricky with the Kroot is that they all look exactly like this. That's actually a problem I'm running into with the heroes. Each one of these boxes came with a War Shaper, and I only really want one War Shaper, so I have I have an extra War Shaper, but that's kind of okay because I'm gonna need 3 Flesh Shapers, and I don't really wanna buy 3 Flesh Shapers because it's a cool model, but it looks exactly like a normal Kroot, and then I don't want just the same exact kind of cool guy, so I think I might try to kit bash those, just so that I have a little bit more variety in this army. But other than that, so that's my giant swarm of Kroot. And Kroot swarms are really, really fun because they're shockingly survivable. It's really fun to just, so with that 5-up invulnerable save against range attacks, all of a sudden I don't care about cover because I don't care about my armor save because I'm always gonna be taking the invulnerable save. So I can get really, really careless about my moving. It's not careless, I'm just not trying to hug cover to save my life because cover is not gonna keep me alive. Nothing is gonna keep me alive. I'm little tiny Kroots, but I want to get their job done. And so I can just run them forward, move block. 20 Krooties can really, really control the board. It's kind of wonderful. And with 6-up Feel No Pains, with a decent amount of very bad shooting, you can sometimes get some stuff done. Weirdly, the Flesh Shaper actually gives them, their 6-up Feel No Pain goes to a 5-up Feel No Pain if they kill something in close combat. Probably never gonna happen, but if it does, a 5-up, no one's ever gonna say no to a 5-up Feel No Pain. That is excellent. The little Kroots have been doing really, really well for me in my games. The really important thing though is the Kroot Rampagers. The Rampagers are incredibly powerful. They can hand out mortal wounds, which is ideal because Kroot are not that good at killing anything. And so they're the guys that actually do the killing. And Sean is starting to learn that. And so I'm having to play a little bit more defensively with those guys and make sure that he doesn't get shots on them until I'm ready because they have to make their charges and they have to actually deal some damage. But they're actually kind of a squad of, well, I'm taking 6-man squads, but they're actually decently maneuverable and they have a good movement of 7. They have Scout, which is really, really nice. So those guys are the linchpin of my force. One thing that I'm struggling with a little bit is the Gnarlock Riders. The Gnarlock Riders are real bad, kind of. They're strength 7, they have, I think 3 or 4 wounds. I was taking them in squads of 1, but actually you don't wanna take them in squads of 1. Number 1, because they're just gonna whiff. When they shoot their gun, they hit on like 4s, it's strength 7, AP -1, damage 1 or 2. And so they would just whiff all their shots. Now instead of taking 3 squads of 1, I'm taking 2 squads of 2. And that actually means that they do make their hits. And it's really important for them to make their hits because the Kroot have a stratagem called a Trap Well Laid, which gives all of my Kroot units +1 AP for fighting that particular unit. That pairs really nicely with the Salamander's reroll hits on one particular unit, and just the Tau in general get +1 to attack for units that are already injured. So 2 actually gives me a good chance of hitting the target so that I can pop the strat and hopefully killing a guy so that they're below their starting number of wounds so that my Kroot army gets +1 to hit, reroll the hit, +1 AP. Those stacks start to actually make my Kroot weapons really, really dangerous. Moving away from the Kroot a little bit, the Tau auxiliaries. Number 1, the ethereal, 50 points, and every single turn I get to roll a 4-up to try to get a free command point. Just really, really good. She's a battery, but I love her. But keeping her alive is one of the reasons why I think I need these Kroot allies. Right now, I've been taking them as the Melta Crisis suits. And the Melta Crisis suits are really good and provide some good anti-armor, which this army severely lacks. However, one thing I'm finding with this army is deep strikers kind of ruin my day. Having models popping up in my backfield, I don't really have a good way to deal with it because my entire Kroot army is moving up the board in a giant wave. And so when things get behind the line, it really, really throws me. And so I think I might take one of these squads and turn them into a Sun Fury squad with the plasma guns, because the plasma guns are gonna do a pretty good job of one-shotting most deep striking units, like Assault Marines or Space Marine Scouts or Mandrakes or Warp Spiders. Like the things that are designed to just hop onto the opponent's deployment zone, wipe whoever is standing there, like the poor little ethereal, and kind of take over. And so I think one of these squads, giving that tool to one of these squads is going to be really, really handy. And I didn't even plan for this, but I actually glued on random guns to my Crisis Suit teams because I had all of the bits to give them all the Melta guns, but I looked at all of these really pretty guns and I wanted to use them all. And the Crisis Suit teams, it's really annoying. It's 3 different squads that can take a mixture of like 5 different weapon options. Eventually, I just decided I'm not gonna buy 100 Crisis Suits, so I'm only gonna have these 6. So I might as well just glue on the guns that I think are really, really cool. And at the top of the game, I'll just tell my opponent what I'm bringing. Everyone's bringing Melta, everyone's bringing Plasma, everyone's bringing Flamer. They're never gonna bring the Flamer. But I have them modeled on the actual miniatures and they look really, really cool. So 2 squads of Crisis Suits. One probably with the Melta and then one with the Plasma for trying to get rid of deep strikers. Then I have a broadside battlesuit. The broadside is an interesting unit. It's actually pretty darn cheap in game. It's got some good anti-tank. You can take 2 missile drones, which is kind of nice. Only hitting on 5s, but that's 4 shots hitting on 5s. I think strength 7, AP -1, damage 2. Not a bad little shooting attack. Also, not bad if you want to split fire and try to cause 1 wound to an enemy unit to bring them below their starting strength to make the rest of my Kroot army a little bit better. But I might, it's hard. I like the Crisis Suit team. I might drop 1 Melta Crisis Suit team for another broadside battlesuit, but I need to play it a few more times in Tabletop Simulator to see how effective that is and if I want to go down that rabbit hole or not. But I think this army is going to give me everything I want because I really like the Kroot. I really like a lot of Kroot, and I get to bring some of my favorite Tau units like the Crisis Suit teams and the broadside battlesuits. Tau are really cool, but I don't really want to paint a bunch of Fire Warriors, and so now I don't have to. Kroot are the most expensive army to collect in 40k, but I've been doing a pretty good job of getting this army together on the cheap. The only things that I'm missing is I need to get 2 more boxes of rampagers. That's going to be a little bit expensive. I need 1 box of Kroot Hounds, and the Kroot Hounds might be the worst value proposition in all of Warhammer 40,000. I'm pretty sure they're 40 points in game, and I think they're $40. That's really ridiculously bad. I do have 3 little 3D prints, and so I can probably get another 2 3D prints, but I've only got 3 poses on the STL file, so I don't know if I want to just flood the board with the same exact guy. I might break down and buy 1 box of Kroot Hounds, or maybe I can do something else fun. But yeah, that's where Kroot really starts to add up. And then in actual Kroot Warriors, I have 16, and then I have 20 and 20. So I need 20 plus 10 more. That's a lot of Kroot. That's quite a few Kroots. And I don't know exactly how I'm gonna buy them. My goal is to find the old Kroot box, because the old Kroot box came with 16 guys, and that's just way cheaper than 10 guys for $58 versus 16 guys for, I think it was like $55 before it left the Games Workshop web store. I've been checking eBay daily and I haven't been seeing the old box pop up, but when it does, I'm gonna be sniping a couple of those hopefully so that I can bump the numbers of Kroots up quite a bit. It seems like 40k gets way easier when you have 100 models on the board as opposed to like a Space Marine list of 22 miniatures. And you hurt. It physically hurts me when one of my Space Marines dies because that is a significant portion of my army. When I lose a 20-man blob of Kroot, I don't even care because we have a stratagem that lets us take that 20-man blob and put it right back into strategic reserve and then bring it back onto the board. It is fantastic. Although, playing Kroot, I've actually been learning more about 40k because the morale phase has started to matter. If my guys are battle shook when they die, I can't use that stratagem to bring them back. So I actually have to play a little bit more cleverly thinking about being battle shook. Usually when like I'm playing my Space Marines and Sean is playing like his World Eaters, we kind of agree at the top of the game that morale is just not gonna matter this game because we both have excellent leadership statistics. And so it's just not gonna matter. But Kroot, they don't. And I have so many units and they do die. So failing battle shock is actually something that this army does fairly regularly. So I think it's gonna be bringing War Shapers to try to auto pass morale or getting morale forgiven because that's what the War Shaper can do. And just playing a little bit cleverly because I want to put that squad into strategic reserve early game so that I don't have to hold on to 2 CP all game. And once I spend that 2 CP and I've got that squad back and I'm bringing like an extra 140 points to the game, then I can just start spending that CP however I want. And hopefully my Tau Ethereal is giving me more. Currently, I think every game I've played, she's given me 2 free CP, which is really, really good. It'd be great if she managed to pull it off every single turn, but it's a 50-50. I get it. It's not a sure thing. And you can't bring more ethereals to make it happen more often because no matter how many ethereals you have, you only get to try it. You only get to use the rule once per phase. So it's one try 50-50, but it is kind of fun to pull that slot machine lever and see what happens. I have been enjoying the spit out of my Kroot army. Currently though, it's not ready. I've just been playing it on the computer. And so I really, really want to get playing it in real life. My friend local game store is probably going to be hosting RTs, Rogue Trader tournaments pretty soon. And I would really like to bring my Tau. And by Tau, I mean Kroot. I mean, technically this is a Tau army, but really it's a Kroot army. I could do my Dark Eldar, but I want it to be Kroot. I want to be playing Kroot. If any of you guys have that army that in the back of your mind, you've always kind of toyed with the idea of collecting, I highly suggest trying it out on Tabletop Simulator first, because if you could find out right in that moment, oh, you do not enjoy playing this army, or you could find out you need to get this army right now because it's perfect for you, and it'll help you list build, it'll help you list tailor, it'll help you come up with all of the things that you actually need in order to play the game properly. You don't waste any money on getting any units that you aren't going to be taking in games. Like, this is my list. Nothing missing. I know exactly what needs to be added, and I can just strategically grab those kits on eBay, hopefully, so that I can get a little bit of a discount because this is a very expensive army, but I am excited. Almost as excited as I am to tell you about our website. EonsOfBattle.com is the place to find our new merch, like the Nick and J dice. The J dice roll really well when I'm playing Kroots. And our website is the best way to support us doing what we do with a membership. Each month, members get 1 credit that they can use on our new monthly train packs or any previous pack we have ever made. For the month of January, we made The Fall, Part 2, Guns. Big guns. This set focuses on printable high-caliber ordnance ready to rock a battlefield. This set features the enormous battle cannon, a building-sized gun encased in the Gothic shrine for sending 100-pound shells into orbit, the sun cannon, an energy turret for throwing hot balls of glowing energy across the landscape, and the humble field artillery for mopping up whatever's left. This set perfectly complements the Fall buildings and is the second of 3 sets focused on getting a proper 40k board up and running as easily as possible. In terms of getting this army ready to rock and roll, I don't really know. It took me a full year to get 2,000 points of Dark Eldar, but I've already put together a bunch of Kroot. I know my way around a Kroot. I know I have to paint like 100 Kroot carnivores, but for some reason, I feel like it's not going to be that bad. I feel like I can do it in a fairly timely manner. The Kroot rampagers are going to take a little bit of time, and the Krootox riders, I actually own 1 Krootox rider. I own a second Krootox rider because I complained to Games Workshop. When I got this guy in the mail, this is a Finecast mini or a Failcast mini, and there was a really, really bad mold slip in the face, and I just kind of resculpted the face. But I did complain to Games Workshop because I shouldn't have had to resculpt it, and so they did send me a replacement one. So I do have two. It's not stealing. It was defective, but I was just able to make it work. But I have two of the old riders, and then I've got two of the new riders. And so that's another thing that I have to do for this army. And then kit bashing and converting all of the different characters. I need 3 Flesh Shapers, 1 War Shaper, 1 Trail Shaper, 2 Lone Spears, and a Partridge in a Pear Tree, and an Ethereal, but I've already got the Ethereal. I just need to put it together and paint it. Put it together and paint it is kind of what I have to do for this entire army, but I'm really, really pumped for it. I'm hoping, I think they're gonna start running the Rogue Trader events in like March. Oh, it's gonna be really, really tight, but I think I might be able to make it happen. Maybe April. Thanks for watching.